Hi, I'm Leigh Buchanan, an editor-at-large at Inc. magazine. I'm here today with Adam Grant, who is a professor at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Adam's new book is called Originals, and it's about nonconformists, how to become them, and how and why society and organizations should encourage them. Adam, hi, welcome.
Thanks, Leigh.
It seems to me that we are in this age where the business world in particular places enormous importance and a great premium on innovation, on disruptive ideas. Why in this kind of environment is it so hard for original ideas to surface and people to get them accepted?
It shouldn't be, right? But there's so many leaders who talk about it, but don't actually do it. Creativity, originality, nonconformity make it harder to predict the future. You end up in a situation where you're constantly turning left when you expected to be turning right. You're having to try things ways you've never done them before, as opposed to following standard operating procedures. And especially middle managers hate nonconformity because it makes it really difficult for them to do their jobs. We need to teach middle managers to be less risk averse and to stop rejecting every new idea they see because they're worrying about the downsides of it, as opposed to saying, maybe this has some potential.
In the book, you say there are sort of two things that you need to have more original ideas out there. And one is the creative piece. We have to create more ideas. And the other piece is kind of the curation piece, which is the idea that we have to be better at selecting which ideas are worth pursuing. I would love to create more original ideas, and I would love to be better at picking which of my brilliant ideas, I'm sure they're all amazing to me, are worth actually pursuing. So how would I go about that?
Well, the first thing you would do is actually generate more ideas. The evidence says that our first 15 to 20 ideas are way less original than our next dozen. But most of us never get to that next dozen because we fall in love with the first two ideas we come up with, and we're like, boom, I've got it. But your first ideas are usually your most conventional, right? They're the most familiar, the most similar to the status quo. And a lot of us have to rule out the obvious before we can get to the unusual and remote. So if you track great creators and originals throughout history, what you see is they were not on average better than their peers. They just produced more volume, which gave them more variety and a better shot at stumbling on something truly different. If you look at great composers, there's an amazing study looking at how productivity actually drives popularity and quality. Mozart, Beethoven, Bach had tons of misses, lots of compositions that went nowhere and that nobody remembers. But they also generated hundreds and in some cases thousands of pieces, which gave them a good chance of coming up with something truly unique. And I think that most of us just need to double or triple the number of ideas we try when we're creating.
So how do you figure out which ones are the best?
One thing you can't do is rely on your own judgment, right? We tend to be too positive on our own ideas, but you also, as we discussed, have to be really careful with managers because managers tend to compare ideas to existing prototypes. Seinfeld went this way, right? So nobody's ever seen a sitcom that doesn't wrap itself up before, and it doesn't have a logical or linear plot. You don't even like the characters, and a bunch of people rejected it. But you look at that and say, it's kind of original, and it did reasonably well. We see this too in publishing all the time, right? So the Harry Potter books, too long for a children's book. Who would ever read that? So if you can't trust yourself and you often can't trust managers, who do you go to? I think the best answer is to fellow creators, your peers who are also generating ideas. There's some wonderful research by Justin Berg, a Stanford professor, looking at circus artists. So if you were going to, let's say, do a Cirque du Soleil performance, you submit your video, and then he actually has you predict how likely is this video to really take off with audiences relative to what other performers are doing. And people were terrible at judging their own videos. They were way too enthusiastic about their own juggling. But managers also were bad for a different reason. They were too negative. They committed a lot of false negatives, rejecting the most unconventional and novel ideas. It was the fellow creators judging each other's performances who were the most open to different kinds of possibilities, but also willing to say, this is kind of a bad idea when something didn't work out.
Okay, let's scale this up to kind of the enterprise level. I'm the CEO of a company, and I want my employees to be more original. What do I do?
So if you're a leader and you want your employees to be more original, first thing you do is stop hiring on cultural fit. This is something I hear all the time, and it drives me crazy. Because if you hire people for culture fit, the research shows you will consistently hire people who are dead similar to each other, who think the same way, who come from the same kinds of backgrounds, who share a common set of values. And that weeds out diversity of thought. Instead of hiring on cultural fit, you want to hire on cultural contribution. You don't look for people who match your culture, you look for what's missing in your culture and bring in people who can actually add that. I think a second thing that leaders can do is picture themselves as the enemy. Lisa Bodell at Future Think has this terrific practice that I had a chance to be involved in at Merck. Ken Frazier, the Merck CEO, says, we want to drive more innovation. We don't want to be a large bureaucracy. So a group of executives come together and they do an exercise called Kill the Company, where they literally have to brainstorm about how to put Merck out of business. And the energy in the room just soars. People are so excited to say like, oh, this is a great idea and we are going to kill ourselves this way. But what's interesting is after they do that, they then have to figure out, well, our competitors are probably considering a lot of these possibilities. How are we going to beat them there or defend against these kinds of threats? And I think what's powerful about this exercise is you end up shifting your perspective. So you don't start out on defense, where people tend to be cautious and they're trying to protect against lots of different possibilities. Instead, you're on offense and you get to drill deep into a couple of really creative ideas.
So just in terms of people sort of standing up for their own ideas, we assume that if you're going to be a nonconformist and an original, you've got to be kind of loud and passionate and vocal. And sort of the best champion for your own ideas, but it sounds like maybe that's not always true.
I think this is a lot more mixed than I would have expected going in. So my favorite example is Rufus Griscom, this serial entrepreneur. He starts a company called Babbel, and it's a parenting blog. He goes to investors and says, here are the 3 reasons why you should not invest in my company, and walks away with over $3 million in funding that year.